All right, so this is the third of the three articles that I wrote on seemingly pointless suffering. And if it wasn't obvious from the title why I'm doing this, I'm wearing my Metallica t-shirt that I got when I heard them play live about 2.5 years ago in Dallas, Fort Worth. It'll become pretty obvious why I'm doing that as we go through this. Now, I make use of a lot of different songs and music, about 4 or 5 different ones in this article. I'm going to try to upload this with clips from those music videos and songs. If that doesn't work and they get taken down for copyright reasons, I'll just edit them out and include links to those songs so you can go listen to them elsewhere, because it is very important that if you're going to get the point of what I'm trying to do, I think you actually need to hear the music as well as me just reading things off to you. Also, this one isn't quite as technical as the previous one, but I'm still going to make use of some slides and diagrams No, just some slides, not really diagrams, to help explain things a little bit better. So you'll see those dropping in from time to time. So I'll just get going here. Now, I suspect that if you're not a rock fan, the people who know me know this because I talk about it all the time, but if you're not a rock fan, you're not going to have any idea that Metallica actually wrote a song about the Exodus. The story is that their original bassist saw the death of the firstborn in the Ten Commandments, said something like, "Whoa, it's like creeping death," and the song was born. Now it's one of their most popular songs, and they often open concerts with it. Now, despite me being a Metallica fan for years, it was never one of my favorite songs until I heard them play it live. It just sounds better live, and the audience adds things to it. I put together a mashup of scenes from The Prince of Egypt with them playing it live, which I'll include a link to so you can hear that if you go listen to that to get the point. If you don't want to listen to the whole thing, here's a clip that shows the song opening with these 4 guttural existential screams. And now, as I'm sure you can hear, even though those screams the audience adds are not on the studio version, the music itself just kind of practically cries out for someone to scream during those points. And just to help drive the point home even more, if you couldn't quite hear or see the point that this is a song about the Exodus, here's another clip for you. Now, Exodus says that when the Israelites were enslaved for 430 years, they cried out to God to deliver them, and he heard their cries and did so. There's other points about, was it 400 years or was it 430 years? One source says that, one says 400, one says 430. I'm not going to really get into all that. It's tangential to the point here. It's likely that during that time of oppression, some of the cries that the Israelites made were wordless existential cries of anguish akin to what the fans yell during creeping death. At least that seems reasonable to me. I really, really doubt that Metallica intended that connection when they wrote the song, but just as the music cries out for a scream or two, being enslaved for generations certainly cries out for some screaming as well. Now, even if the number isn't completely literal, if, say, it's an approximation or something along those lines, as the fact that there's 2 different numbers given which it would suggest, it still would follow that for whole generations, perhaps as many as 10, everyone was enslaved. That is, there were many generations where the grandparents, the parents, and the children all cried out to God, but did not see deliverance. Eventually, God did send Moses to deliver their descendants, and it's natural that we focus on that, because that's what the text of Exodus focuses on, but many people never saw it. Now, As my family and I have been dealing with Eden's cancer and also my wife Sarah's ongoing chronic medical conditions, I noticed something kind of odd. A significant amount of well-meaning people sent us Christian songs, poems, and similar things to try and encourage us. Now that's not what's odd. What's odd is that I found all of those things to be profoundly unhelpful. At best, they were a waste of time that missed the mark completely, and often they struck me as very dishonest and inauthentic. I know this is a little bit of a tangent here, but I absolutely hate that I have to use the term authentic like this here, and the reason why is that term has been co-opted by some very bad philosophies and ideologies. In many of these philosophies and ideologies, authenticity, or being your real self, has just become a buzzword or excuse for enabling our own selfishness and vices. Every human being has evil and bad tendencies in us that should be curbed, contained, and fought against. In my opinion, the bulk of the "I'm just being authentic" claims that we hear in contemporary culture come from a very Nietzschean or postmodern outlook that in practical effect denies this fact that all of us have bad tendencies which you absolutely should fight against. So if people tell you that you are doing evil and or behaving immorally and your response is something like, "Well, I've got to live my authentic life," it's pretty likely you bought into one of those bad ideologies and you're just justifying or ignoring your worst tendencies instead of having the courage to stand and fight against them. So, while I hate that I have to use that term for that reason, it's still the case that it's the best term I can think of here. I mean, I just can't think of anything other to use other than authentic and inauthentic when I'm describing these things. Now, getting back off that tangent there, I don't want to disparage any of the people who sent my wife and I these kind of things. They were being kind. They were doing the best they could. I'd rather 1,000 people send me things that I find very unhelpful than the alternative, because that would show me 1,000 people care and they're trying to help me. That's good. Rather, the odd thing is that the Christian art, the bulk of which was written mostly for the purpose of speaking to and comforting people who are suffering, was just so profoundly unhelpful. It was not only not comforting, it often seemed to just make things worse. And so, why was it all missing the mark so badly? Given that Christianity is true, which I do think, and I'll argue adamantly for, this is the opposite of what I would expect. That is, just using the songs of Metallica as examples, although I could point to plenty of other rock songs in this category. Songs like Creeping Death, Hell on Fire, The Unforgivens, The Day That Never Comes, and you could even throw in like Hero of the Day, Bleeding Me, Outlaw Torn, Until It Sleeps are all within my hands. And as I said, I could give you songs from like Disturbed or Shinedown and Godsmack that do pretty much the same thing. Well, all these songs were connecting with me in ways that the specifically Christian art was not. And further, these songs seemed real and authentic, and again, I hate that I have to use that term, but I do, in ways that the Christian art and music often felt fake and frequently just, well, dumb. Now, I've liked hard rock and hard rock music for my entire adult life, but it seems to me that there was something much more going on here than just my own musical preferences. I felt anew in a sense that I couldn't quite articulate and explain that these songs got it, while the explicitly Christian ones missed the mark, and missed the mark badly frequently. So I spent a lot of time puzzling over this. I started and abandoned many attempts at writing something where I was trying to figure this out. I'm recording this in February, and not this coming March, but last March. One of the societies that I regularly attend that has a philosophy division decided to do something on Christian worship. And I really, really wanted to write something like this for that conference because it would have fit so well. But I just couldn't make it work. I was struggling with how I make sense of this, and I just couldn't get it to work. It took me a long time to figure this out. Now, I don't mean the entirety of what I'm arguing in the essay and in this video here. Rather, what I mean is, when I said, I find the Christian art useless, no one disputed that. And when I told them that I'd find Metallica songs better at expressing and dealing with the angst and temptation to despair that this seemingly pointless suffering has produced in me and my family, no one gave me pushback on that point either. In fact, the typical response was, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. But stop and think about that. That's absurd. If Christianity is true, this is the opposite of what we should expect. Now, if this still sounds absurd to you, I recommend you go and read any of the Psalms of Lament here. Psalms 3 through 7, 9 through 14, 17, or any of the other Psalms of Lament. I'll let you pick which one. Just pause, go read one, and then come back, and then tell me which one of the following seems more psalm-like to you. Mouths so full of lies tend to black your eyes. Just keep them closed, keep praying, just keep waiting. waiting for the one, the day that never comes, when you stand up and feel the warmth, but the sunshine never comes. No, no, the sunshine never comes. Or, I'm fighting a battle you've already won. No matter what comes my way, I will overcome. Don't know what you're doing, but I know what you've done. I'm fighting a battle you've already won. And now it's pretty obvious what I'm doing here, at least I hope it is, but I'm going to play you a clip of the first song and then the second one, so it's even more obvious what I'm doing.
I'm fighting a battle. Yeah. You've already won. No matter what comes my way, I will overcome. Don't know what you're doing, but I know what you've done. And I'm fighting a battle.
So the first song is Metallica's The Day That Never Comes, and the second is the popular worship song, You've Already Won. And I will argue the first one sounds a whole lot more like a psalm, especially a psalm of lament. I might get some pushback from people on this, I haven't so far, but I'll go so far as claiming that I think you have to interpret the scriptures very loosely, and by that I mean poorly, to pull something out of them like You've Already Won. At the most basic level, this song just doesn't even make sense. Why fight a battle that Christ has already won? If that is indeed the case, then I should just stop fighting, as the fighting is at best a wasted effort. But that's not what the song is communicating. And before you object, the fact that it's a Christian worship song doesn't excuse it from not making sense. More on that in a bit here. So, the point I'm getting at here is this dynamic is bizarre. Metallica is not Christian and makes no claims to be so. I play my kids some Metallica songs and they love it, but I play them a very curated list. I don't recommend at all that you listen to every single Metallica song because they have some that don't have these good messages at all, and I don't play those for my kids. Conversely, You've Already Won is written by Christians and intended to be a Christian worship song. I've heard it in more worship services than I can count. So how does a secular hard rock song, or maybe metal, depending on how you want to classify Metallica, how does that seem more biblical, at least more like a song of lament, than a worship song does? Well, the breakthrough that enabled me to explain this actually came at that conference I mentioned in March of last year. My friend Austin Williams was presenting his essay, Hold On and Let Go, Phenomenological Analysis of Tarrying in Prayer. And he said some things in that essay about tension that sparked the realization in me. And I came up and talked to him about it later. I was so excited that I'm like, finally, somebody's given me the language and resources to explain what's been going on here. The point is that the songs I was identifying with were embracing and pushing into the tension. The Christian art was not. It was doing the opposite and encouraging me to give up, i.e., I'm fighting a battle you've already won, and ignore the tension, or pretend the tension just isn't there. Now, remember, the Israelites had to endure 400-ish years of bondage. Job had to lose his health, wealth, and most of his family. Christ himself had to be abandoned by his friends and experience such stress that he sweated blood and then be tortured and crucified before the resurrection. But apparently God forbid that any of our art or music talk about tension and difficulty there within. Now, the late he was either a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I don't recall which off the top of my head. John Wellward developed a term for this phenomenon called spiritual bypassing. What this is, it's a way of avoiding the difficulty of actually dealing with tension, pain, and negative emotions by simply appealing to something spiritual or supernatural. I.e., God's already taken care of everything, so why on earth do you feel tension? Perhaps you just haven't accepted what God has to say, or perhaps you have too little faith. If you are a Christian and feel tension, it must be that there's something wrong with you. How can Christians feel tension? Now, if you stop and think about this for a moment, that sounds an awful lot like what Job's friends started saying, and then God condemned them for it. Now, of course, no one ever actually said this to Sarah or I directly, and our friends wouldn't because they're not awful people, and nothing anyone sent to us directly said those things either. But it was typically applied or assumed by most of the art and music, etc., and so on. It's applied or assumed because the Christian art focused exclusively on God will make everything all right, and then just glossed over or completely ignored the fact that it's often a long and extremely painful process to get here. Again, the Exodus was preceded by 400 some odd years of bondage. And the problem is, once you become aware of this, you're going to see this everywhere in evangelical art and music. Now, if you like that kind of art and music, I suppose it might be polite of me to apologize to you that I just ruined a lot of that for you, but I'm really not sorry about it because most of it's just pretty awful. And another kind of tangential note here is, as I was researching and doing all this stuff, I found out that John Wellward was actually a Buddhist, which I found to be very, very ironic because this, well, first of all, this suggests the problem transcends Christianity, and perhaps spiritual bypassing is much more of an American Western problem than specifically a Christian one, which from the knowledge I have of Christian history, I suspect that's probably the case. Now, the ironic part is that since he was a Buddhist, it seems odd to me that he identified this concept as, again, it seems to me, one of the basic tenets of Buddhism is to do a type of spiritual bypassing. That is, the Buddha says we suffer because we have desires that are not fulfilled, which is absolutely true. And then his solution is to simply stop desiring. That is, stop being a human being who desires things. That certainly strikes me as a very extreme form of spiritual bypassing. Now, I suspect actually doing that is just simply impossible for human beings, but even if we could pull this off, it's just an extreme form of spiritual bypassing. So back to it. Well, I understand why this seems like a very odd thing for me to say, especially if you're an evangelical Christian. I'm going to argue that many of Metallica's songs about suffering and struggle are much more faithful to biblical teaching on the matter than a lot of popular evangelical songs are, especially our worship songs. I'm not saying that if you dig into it, you can't find Christian evangelical art that deals with this well. You can. But it's obscure. You have to look very hard for it. You go to your average evangelical worship service, you're not going to hear any of the stuff that deals with this very well. At least I would be shocked if you did. I won't go through here and give an analysis of all the songs that I found meaningful and helpful, as that would just take too long. That'd be like 3 or 4 hours, and who wants to listen to me talk for 3 or 4 hours? Just the name of the song, The Day That Never Comes, that's pretty much self-explanatory. My family and I want the day of health and peace for Sarah and Eden, but the day never comes. And generally speaking, all good and decent people want a day when there is peace, justice, and joy, but at least so far, and the day has not come. I hope the day will come, but it might not come in my life. So, to help illustrate this more, what I'm going to do here is compare Halo on Fire to When Death Was Arrested. I won't do like a complete long literary criticism breakdown of both songs. I could do that. I was trained to do that in my undergraduate degree because I got a degree in English. As again, that would take too long. I'm going to just try to make the point here and then move on. Now, the reason I picked When Death Was Arrested is because it's actually, I actually like the song. I don't think it's an objectively bad song, and it doesn't make obvious and blatant theological and philosophical mistakes. If I wanted to pick a bad example like that, there are loads of them. But I don't want to do that. What I want to try to do is not compare the best with the worst, but I want to pick 2 strong good examples where, to avoid this idea of, hey, you're just picking the best and contrasting it with the worst. No, I tried to pick 2 good examples and compare those with each other. Nonetheless, I hope what you'll see here is this ignoring the tension or spiritual bypassing problem is just assumed by this song. Now, the reason I picked Halo on Fire is because for reasons I didn't initially understand, it spoke to and inspired me to just keep pushing on. There were some days when the angst of what's happening to Eden and Sarah would just really, really get to me, and I'd just listen to the song over and over again while working out or doing chores and other things around the house, and at the end of it I'd feel like, Okay, I can do this one more day. Now, what I've come to realize as I work through all this is the primary reason, I think, is because this song just oozes tension all over the place. The intensity of the music builds and builds until the end. Adding to the tension, the lyrics contain contrary statements. And to help explain this, the music video is about a young woman going to an underground fight club and continuing to fight, even though it seems she's just getting beaten down over and over and over again. So I'll play you a quick clip of part of the song here. And now on this slide here, you can see all the lyrics to the song, and I'm going to make some points about them here. Now, typically, good art will be open to some interpretation. That's, again, one of those rules of thumb. Not every piece of good art is open to interpretation, but most of it is. And most of Metallica's best songs are a bit vague, and with some exceptions, when people have asked them, how do you interpret this, they tend to be coy and avoid actually saying how to interpret them. So it's pretty easy to hear you listen to Halo on Fire and think, well, that's cool. I think the music inspires some resilience, but what's it about? Well, I'm going to try to tell you what I think it's about. First of all, the lyrics contain some odd elements. In the two verses, each line fits with both the line before and the line after it, so you can deprive to feel so alive, or you can feel so alive by obeying. And you can also obey so as not to turn away, so there's a really tight coherence to the verses. Then the chorus and the bridge bring in contrary elements. That is, it doesn't make sense to fear turning on the light if the darkness won't go away. Darkness is dispelled by light. Similarly, how can a resurrection be dark? Resurrections are good things. How can perfection be wicked? These are all contrary terms. And even the song's name, Halo on Fire, alludes to a contrary. A halo is a sign of something or someone being holy, and while we can plausibly find some ways to associate fire with holiness, Scripture does that frequently, having your halo burning seems to suggest that your holiness is being damaged, destroyed, or is in some other way wrong. Then we can go watch the video to try to explain a bit more. In the video, what you see is a very thin young woman go to an underground fight club and engage in fights of escalating difficulty until she's paired against a very muscular guy who probably has 100 pounds on her. It's also at this point that the music starts to intensify and the lyrics begin repeating over and over again, "Hello darkness, say goodbye." Now naturally the man easily throttles her, and then she's beaten so badly that she simply cannot get back up. Then we see her wake up, presumably the next day, cover her bruises, go back, and try again. The last we see of her, she's staring down an unknown opponent while high-fiving the audience. I think the point is that she's staring down another opponent who she knows she cannot beat, but she's going to try anyway, because that's what resilience and determination is. You try, and try again, even knowing that you will not succeed. Now, there are actually lots of things in life where we need to keep trying, even if we know we will fail. You gain or demonstrate something of great value in just the attempt, even if you are certain that you cannot win. In many great stories, there's a vast army coming, and the hero and his forces, they simply cannot win. When the commander, general, the king, the hero of the story, refuses to surrender and fights anyway, we recognize this as a heroic and noble thing to be praised, even if they actually lose in the story. And I think this is what this music video is showing us. Like this young woman, do you have the courage and resilience to fight when you know you cannot win? Now, obviously, this analogy would break down, as it's not necessary to go back to an underground fight club over and over again, but I think it still makes the point. And there are far too many biblical stories to count where all seems lost and to hope itself would be stupid. But then God says, just do as I say, and I'll take care of it. And when the people in the story listen to God and try anyway, things go well. And when they don't, it doesn't. Now, when you are dealing with suffering, especially seemingly pointless suffering, the coherence of life will often seem shattered by the contrary elements and the things that just don't seem to fit together. For example, I know God loves Eden more than it's even possible for me to, and yet, if I could, I would rip the cancer out of Eden's body in an instant, but God has not done so. Now, I think there are plausible answers to that. I talked about some of them. But again, it seems prima facie contrary, and it's the same thing with my wife's ongoing health problems. So this song starts off with coherence and then introduces more and more contrary, or at least seemingly contrary elements, while the intensity of the music increases. Now, we all want life to make sense. We need it to have some sense of coherence to make sense of it. So, we all want life to make sense, and that's not a bad desire. We need things to have some sense of coherence to make sense of it. When we don't know the whys of suffering, it makes life seem, at least seem, incoherent. Even if it's actually not, it seems and feels that way. Things literally just don't make sense. As I've argued before, perhaps there is this grand cosmic and metaphysical sense in which they do. I genuinely think that's the case. But it certainly doesn't seem or feel that way when you're dealing with suffering that seems pointless. So, also, when you're experiencing suffering, especially very intense suffering, it can literally make your own perceptions fail you. Eleanor Stump, in her book on the Atonement, this isn't in the actual essay I wrote, but it just came to me, she has a bit where she's explaining, well, how could it possibly be that Christ says on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? And her argument is, because that's how intense the suffering is going through, such that his own perceptions are failing him. And hey, if that could happen to Christ, it's certainly going to happen to you and me when we're experiencing really intense suffering. At times, this problem of your perception failing you may distort things so much that you simply cannot trust what your own mind and eyes show you. So, as the song says, open or close my eyes betray. And this is why we all need people around us who will pull us back to reality and anchor us when things like this happen. It's why you need a community of people around you who care and love about you to help you through these times of intense, seemingly pointless suffering, as I'm grateful that the people around Sarah and I have done for our family. This is also why you need to strive to ground your life and faith on sound theology and philosophy, as when the storms of life come, the house that is built on sand will not stand, as Christ said. And if you haven't had the storms in your life yet, get ready. I promise you, they are coming. So, the point here is, I listen to this song or watch the video, and then rather than despair, I think, okay, maybe I really don't have enough. I don't have enough virtue, discipline, or endurance to go for years more. But just like that woman, I've got one more day. I've got one more round in me. And really, that's, in many senses, all you ever need to do. Just go one more day. And I really don't think this song would inspire me to try to have strength and resilience if it simply papered over and bypassed the genuine tension and struggle it's trying to deal with. Rather, it inspires me in large part because it embraces the tension and struggle head on and says, oh, this is going to hurt. It's going to hurt like absolute hell. Push through anyway. So even when you get knocked down, and even when you know you can't win, and even when it hurts so bad you think you can't get back up, treat your wounds, get up and try again. Maybe one day you won't be able to get up again, but that's not today. And I think to some extent that's literally what the Israelites did for the 400 some odd years before God sent Moses to deliver them. Okay, so now let's compare that to When Death Was Arrested. And again, I'll put the lyrics on the screen here for you and then start with a brief clip of the song.
Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your love, it's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you.
So, as I said before, I don't think this is a bad song. I think it's one of the better worship songs. There are songs that are commonly sung in church these days that are so bad that I refuse to sing them. This is not one of them. I'm glad when they play this song. I enjoy singing it. It has no immediately obvious or theological or philosophical mistakes, and unlike some other songs which are borderline heretical. And even though I like hard rock style music better, this is not bad music at all. Now, it's also pretty straightforward and clear what this song is about. It's using the metaphor of death itself being arrested to celebrate the grace that comes through Christ's death and resurrection. And just in case you didn't get it, the last verse actually explains the metaphor. So there's nothing vague here and very little that's open to interpretation. Now, I have two minor criticisms and then one major one. And if you've been paying attention, you know what the major one's going to be. So first, there's really nothing in this whole song that is open to interpretation. You and I don't have to do any thinking or work, even in a small sense, to understand it. I do think that typically good art should, as a general rule, leave some things open to interpretation. And with this song, if you don't get it, well, I'm not quite sure what to tell you, as it's hard for me to think of a way they could have made it clearer. Now second, and perhaps a little contrary to the first point, the song doesn't actually make it clear what it means for death to be arrested. And what I mean by that is there's a great deal of theology, some of which it turns out is controversial, buried in Christ overcoming death through resurrection. Like, hey, what is your theory of the atonement? People argue about that quite vehemently to the point that some people have labeled other people heretical for a theory of the atonement. Now, it would be very difficult for a song to, incorporate different theories of the atonement and explain them into a song, but it'd be kind of nice if they tried something. The song has nothing to say or point to here. For example, absent the return of Christ, I'm going to die someday, as will everyone else. If death is arrested, how is it that I'm still going to die? Now, I think fairly obviously, because I'm a Christian who's familiar with these things, I would say it's referring to spiritual death or the end of death in our sins. And again, this is another one of those rich theological concepts, and I wish the writers had tried to communicate or allude to that more, or played with that a little bit more. If you are not already familiar with Christian theology, a lot of this will probably be lost. It's similar with the cries of being free that they carry on about with at the end there. I don't know of any Christian, mature or shallow, who doesn't still struggle with being free from sin. That's simply something we will all need to struggle, deal with, and fight against while we're in this life. While the song doesn't explicitly say, hey, you're free, so no more struggle at all, that's kind of a plausible inference to draw. And that leads to my major criticism. The song has absolutely no tension whatsoever. It's so triumphant and joyous that based on this song alone, you could be forgiven for thinking that no Christian ever has any problems ever again. Now, of course, that's not true. I also strongly suspect that if the authors of the song were sitting here and I was talking to them, they would also claim that's not true. But reread or listen to the song again with this criticism and the spiritual bypassing idea in mind, and this should be an easy problem to see. Now, some of this might be because rock music just seems better at expressing angst and other types of music. My friend Jim Jones alluded to this in his novel Utopia Reimagined, where there's just something about rock music that is just better at expressing and dealing with angst and anger than other types of music. At least it certainly seems to be that way. And Jim just expressed that point kind of well in his book there. Christ did not say, "Rejoice, I've taken care of everything." Rather, he said, "Take up your cross and follow me." But you'd be hard-pressed to find that in When Death Was Arrested. Not only is there nothing wrong with celebrating Christ's resurrection and victory over death and sin, it's a good thing to do so. But if that's all or almost entirely what you hear, then you're going to be caught very flat-footed when it comes time to take up your cross. And you will have to take up your cross at some point. The flood is coming. Now, I took that phrase, the flood is coming, from one of Jordan Peterson's lectures on Genesis. Now, he has some very unconventional interpretations of Scripture, but nonetheless he does from time to time pull out some very interesting and useful things, even when it's doubtful that the interpretations he's using are what the original author intended. So his point in that phrase, the flood is always coming, he thinks that's one of the lessons of the flood narrative. And what he means by that is not just like natural disasters, but things like suffering, illness, professional and relationship difficulties. Some disaster is always coming. Something bad is always on the horizon. Something is always on the verge of going wrong, maybe even horribly wrong, and one day it will. So what he says is, make yourself a man who walks with God, and by that what he means is a virtuous and resilient person, and then maybe you can ride out the flood like Noah did, i.e. maybe the flood won't destroy you. Maybe the suffering will not destroy you. And well, the hermeneutic he uses is a bit suspect, I think he has a very good point there. He's giving you sound advice. Suffering and disaster is always lurking around the corner, and if you make yourself a man who walks with God, not just in the sense of being virtuous like he talks about, but in a literal sense, well, maybe it won't destroy you. But you embrace the message that's going on in this song here, and you're going to be quite shocked when the flood gets here. I.e., we have grace and we're finally free. But that doesn't mean that everything will be easy. In fact, what I've found is it often actually just makes things much, much harder. And just like it's easier to stay down, and it's much harder to find the courage and virtue to get up and fight again. That is, it's just like that, excuse me. Now, as I said before, in my opinion, this is actually one of the better contemporary Christian songs, especially one of the better contemporary Christian worship songs. Listen to your average worship service with these problems of avoiding the tension and spiritual bypassing in mind, and you'll find they are numerous. There is little to no tension in them, and in fact in most evangelical art in general, that's one of the reasons why most evangelical art is bad, is because it just ignores and avoids tension. And you'll find that most of these things are so focused on being triumphant that they end up implying there should never be any problem in any Christian's life, ever. Spiritual bypassing is just everywhere. Now, to define a bit what I mean by tension here, what I'm referring to is the tension that comes from simply going through a hard time and or experiencing suffering. For example, you're a soldier in a war where there's active combat. You're going to feel tension, but this is not like cognitive dissonance. It doesn't come from holding incompatible beliefs. Rather, you're feeling stress because you are in war, and suffering produces tension like this. Experiencing suffering, especially seemingly pointless suffering, just causes stress and tension. This is as normal and human a reaction as being hungry and then feeling satisfied after eating. Pretending that there is no tension, that it will all just go away shortly, or other weird things like that, it's just not honest and authentic. But this is what is implied, or at least is a reasonable inference to draw from when Death was arrested, and a lot of other Christian art. There is no sense of learning to endure, no sense of sitting with people in their suffering as Job's friends did, no real sense of acknowledging just how awful, seemingly pointless suffering is. The direct or indirect implication of nearly all the evangelical art on suffering is that God is really just a genie who will fix everything for you if you approach him correctly, have enough faith, or if he just decides you've suffered enough. You just need to perform the correct rituals, demonstrate the right level of faith, even though no one ever actually practically spells out what that looks like or defines it, and then God will fix everything. Learn some resilience, perseverance, and endure even though the suffering has no end in sight? Hardly. The songs and other bad theology tell me that God just wants me to be happy, so it must be that he will end the suffering and make me happy. If he's not, it must be that I'm doing something wrong. After all, he's already won. Let's not even stop and consider the very biblical idea that God might be using suffering to teach me some virtue, and he's often more interested in us being virtuous than he is in us avoiding suffering. And I feel the need to add the caveat here that, again, if you go looking hard for Christian evangelical art that does deal with these things well, you will find it, but it's obscure. It's not what you're going to hear being sung and celebrated in churches, and that's the main problem here. I also know that some of you are going to think, come on, Phil, you're just rationalizing your own preferences because you like hard rock music. But there is evidence beyond my observations that more and more Christians buy into the notion that God wants us to avoid suffering at all costs, or what I like to term the prosperity heresy. A study from Lifeway Research found that 3 in 4 churchgoers, that is 76%, believe that God wants them to prosper financially, including 43% who strongly agree. Fewer 45% believe they have to do something for God in order to receive material blessings. Now, these ideas are not just wrong, they're profoundly unbiblical. And if you read the rest of the study, it's not more encouraging. Now, it would be foolish of me to say that the bad and unbiblical theology our art teaches, probably mostly inadvertently, is the only reason for this rise in a heretical or borderline heretical belief. Such things are complicated and multivariate. But it would be equally foolish to claim there's no effect whatsoever here. Teaching the wrong thing in our art certainly does have some effect. Art does affect culture, as I've argued before in an essay that I got published. It was Undoing Pilate's Error, How the Church Washed Its Hands of Culture in Philosophy of Religion and Art. It's a good book. It's kind of expensive. If you want the essay, just email me and I'll send you a copy of it, the essay that I wrote for free. I don't have a copy of the whole book to send you because that's not mine, but I'll send you a copy of the essay I wrote for free. I'm happy to do that. So, while this should be obvious, the Bible doesn't teach this way of thinking about life and suffering. The The problem here isn't that modern worship songs don't align with my taste in music. It's that they are encouraging bad thinking and bad theology that's unbiblical and also literally just stupid. I would never make these same complaints of a lot of Christian art of the past, like it's the older hymns, like It's Well With My Soul and Amazing Grace. They're definitely different in style from the music I prefer. But my word, do they deal with suffering well and have great theology in them. I'm not going to make these kind of complaints of those. They're wonderful. The Psalms aren't like this. Ecclesiastes isn't like this. The book of Job isn't like this. There's nothing the New Testament teaches that is like this. The other great Christian art of the past isn't like this either. The Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's stories aren't like this. The only thing as I found about this that I could find, there are a few secular stories that are like this, but they're mostly things like Hallmark movies, vapid rom-coms, and some of the dumber and shallower action movies of the 80s and 90s. Basically the action movies that nobody watches anymore today because they didn't really have any substance to them. And this is because we all kind of intrinsically know that this whole deny the tension spiritual bypassing idea is just inauthentic and stupid. It seems like the only group of people who consistently embrace this ridiculous idea are contemporary evangelical Christians in America. And it's possible that there are maybe some other groups in America or the West who do this. I suspect that I don't have the data on this, I'm just speculating here. I suspect that the secular or non-religious people in America are attempting to accomplish roughly the same thing by drowning their lives in entertainment and or distracting themselves by embracing politics to a deeply unhealthy level. That's me speculating. I haven't done research onto that. Maybe I will at some day in the future. So maybe there's something like that going on as well. You find art and media like this is generally looked down on elsewhere because even when people can't put their finger on why, they intrinsically know that there's something deeply wrong with it. Just think about this. How boring and dumb is a story where the hero walks in and immediately everything's solved and there's no tension whatsoever? Who cares? Those are bad stories, and it's bad art when there's no tension. The highest standard, in my opinion, that all art should aspire to is to produce a bittersweet feeling and also inspire you. As I said in the first video about philosophy and theology, if the art you regularly consume and engage with is worthless when your life gets hard, maybe it's time to go find some different, better art. And I can honestly say that I can think of very few examples of currently explicitly evangelical Christian art that does this, and the few that I can are by and large not embraced by most cultures. And now I'll add a little caveat here. Not all art has to be deep, philosophically and profoundly meaningful. Some things are just fun, and that's fine. You know, I play Mario Kart. That's just fun. I'll also argue to the death that the 2018 God of War game has some very deep and profoundly wonderful things to say about how to be a good father and how empty and pointless vengeance is. I published those arguments in that essay that I just mentioned. But, again, I'll also play Mario Kart and other things that are just fun. I think The Dark Knight is not just the best superhero made, but it has some deeply important philosophical things to comment on about society and how the heroes genuinely struggle to combat the deeply nihilistic postmodern philosophy of the Joker. But I'm also going to enjoy the John Wick movies. They're just fun action movies. They're not meant to be anything more. And it's okay to have some things that are just meant to be fun and not do anything more. So, tangent done. There seems to be a basic principle that most good things can only come through struggle and tension. This is, I think, just a basic principle of life, and it's well illustrated in resistance training or weightlifting by the term time under tension. Your body betters itself with time under tension. It's at best unpleasant to do this. If it doesn't hurt when you're doing it, at least to some degree, you're probably doing it wrong, but that's the way things are. Likewise, your character and virtue can be bettered to some degree only by time under tension. To be a good, virtuous person, you must endure suffering. This is one of the main points of James chapter 1, but bypass it by claiming things like, oh yeah, it seems hard, but God's already won, so you need not worry, and you'll miss out on that and set yourself up for failure. What if you're one of the generations that doesn't get to see Moses come? And when I gave a version of this in church to my core group, my friend Alan came up to me and told me that Ronnie Coleman, who was I forget how many times he was Mr. Olympia, but for a while he was the strongest man in the world. He said something along the lines of, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift heavy weights. And I was like, yep, Alan, that's the exact point I'm making here. So, the reason I picked this title, The God That Failed, well, that's a Metallica song, and the story behind that song is that James Hetfield's mother was part of the Christian Science sect, which refuses modern medicine. So when she got cancer, she refused treatment, and of course she died. She followed the God, with a small g, of Christian Science that failed because it's a false, human-made God. Gods of human making, whether they're political, philosophical, sociological, and even the gods of bad and shallow theology, always fail. The healing hand of the real God is, I suspect, sometimes, maybe even often, held back by the shallow, stupid, and bad theology that much of our art portrays. I've heard an excellent theory about Job, that one of the points of the book of Job is that Job had a bad theological understanding of God and was treating God as a genie. He was treating God as a system that he could game. Look at everything that God had to put Job through to correct him of that thinking. God didn't and doesn't fail. The false God that bad art has pointed to us has. The evangelical songs encourage the denial of reality by treating God as if he is a genie who will just fix things if we can just get the ritual right. We want quick and easy answers, and to a large extent that's understandable. But seemingly pointless suffering just doesn't have quick and easy answers, so we end up ignoring the difficulty, spiritually bypassing it, and then we embrace dishonest and inauthentic media or art that also pretends it's all easy and God's just going to fix everything. But this ignores the 400 some odd years of enslavement that came before deliverance. Hence, the God of this bad art is the God that failed because it's just not God. It's some type of distorted genie that doesn't actually exist. And when the actual God comes to you and says, you need to learn to wait and endure before deliverance comes, you're not going to know what to do because you've been taught that you're fighting a battle you've already won. No matter what comes my way, I will overcome. Well, that's just not true. Some things are meant to beat you, and there are some things that you simply cannot overcome. Sometimes we need to be broken because there are parts of us that need to be done away with. Sometimes you need to learn the virtue and resilience that only comes with experiencing suffering and taking up your cross. And maybe, sometimes, the Moses of your story is literally just over the horizon and your day of deliverance is nearly here. Or maybe you're the Moses of your story and God's going to send you to deliver a lot of people. And maybe you've been actually actively resisting God's call for you to go do that, as Moses did at first. But I cannot see how anyone will learn any of this by simply repeating over and over again, no matter what comes my way, I will overcome. So, if you want to be inspired to take up your cross, I cannot recommend to you much in the way of contemporary evangelical art and music, but I'll point you toward a few hard rock songs if you want. I fear to turn on the light, for the darkness won't go away. Now, on the face of it, this above line from Halo on Fire just doesn't seem to make sense, as I alluded to before. Light makes the darkness go away, so how can I be afraid of turning on the light? But if you're in an endless fight, then maybe turning on the light will just confirm that the struggle has no end. Like another Metallica song says, I quote, "My life, the war that never ends." I can certainly imagine those generations of Israelites who never saw deliverance could have felt this way. And I can think of many times in my own life where God had told me, the younger version of me, what was coming, I would have said, oh, hell no, I'm out. Thankfully, God didn't do that, and I stuck around. There have been many, many times where my wife Sarah and I have been waiting for the results of another MRI or another test, and the fear and angst of turning on the light and getting the results is very real. As the darkness just won't go away. Because absent an actual miracle, the best we can hope for is that we've kept the darkness at bay just a little longer, maybe just one more day. So maybe, sometimes like me, you can fear to turn on the light because a part of you worries that if you do, it will just confirm that the darkness won't go away. And that's, since I wrote this initially, that's what's happened now, as Eden's cancer has started growing again. We have to get her on more treatment this time. Hopefully it'll have an effect. Maybe it won't. We'll see. We'll keep praying that it does. One day, all of us are going to meet something that simply cannot be beaten, that is, that we cannot beat. That often repeated saying, God will not give you more than you can handle, well, that's just not true. That's just stupid. It's not true at all. Go try telling that to Job. Go read the Bible and then tell me that. That's ridiculous. Perhaps you've already met this thing that you can't beat, just as I have, or maybe you haven't. Well, you can prepare for these kind of things by disciplining and training your body, mind, and spirit so that there'll be less things that you cannot overcome. And you should do that. But contrary to that song, there are things out there that you will never be able to overcome. So what do you do now? That is, you're going to suffer, and it's pretty likely some, if not most of that, is going to seem pointless, at least at the time. Well, you have some options. You can let this break you. You can rage against God and the injustice of it all. You can attempt to ignore, suppress, and deny it by spiritually bypassing and other options, and that's actually what I think most of us in America do. Or you can learn to suffer nobly by seeking God and virtue. And this latter option is undoubtedly much harder, but it's right, and it will probably go better for you in the long run if you take that. Now, if you do take the later option, you're going to get knocked down over and over and over again. But it's not about that. It's about having the discipline and courage to keep getting up, to try, and try again. Maybe God will decide to deliver you, and maybe he won't. But if you can say in the face of that with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but even if he does not, then you'll have set a good example for your children and their children, and you'll have sought virtue and done what is right, and that's what matters. And maybe just like in Exodus, God will deliver your children and their children's children. The day will come, even if it doesn't come for you. And even if it doesn't come for you, you get the honor of showing your family and the people around you how to suffer heroically. And so then it won't be pointless, even though it will be brutally hard. Or conversely, you can just keep singing about fighting a battle that's already won and see how that works out for you. An awful lot of our music and art sounds a lot like Job's friends. Conversely, some of Metallica's songs sound a whole lot more like Job himself. And while God condemned the words of Job's friends, it's possible to interpret God's words to Job as a rebuke. He didn't claim that Job spoke falsely of him like he did of Job's friends. It's kind of like what Dallas Willard wrote 30 years ago, "What we are selling is irrelevant to our real existence and without the power over our daily life." So these are the reflections I've had on this over the last, well, it's been more than 2 years now, but my family and I are still very in the midst of it. I'm sure I'll have other better reflections one day when it's all over. Even now, I've got scattered thoughts that I cut out of this that I just can't quite make sense of yet, but they're still lurking in the background there, and I'll try to do more with them as I can figure things out. So I have some recommendations. First, if you're not facing pointless suffering right now, be grateful. Second, you should start preparing your soul, mind, and body for it. It's coming, and it's far better that you start preparing now. So to return to the creeping death and the Exodus metaphor that I like so much that I kept going back to, if you look at the end, a flood protects the Israelites while it destroys the Egyptians, and I'll play you the clip of that right now. I've come to think, in ways that I still have a hard time perfectly articulating, that this is what suffering does. If you've resolved yourself to walk with God, to be the man who walks with God, then suffering, even if it's seemingly pointless, will actually be good for you. And it will protect you in some ways that I can't quite articulate or explain. But if you've done the opposite, it's going to destroy you, just like it did Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And since the flood is always coming, well, you better pick one. Now, if after all this, if you bared with me through all this, you've listened to me, and you're still thinking of the songs I've criticized, the art I've criticized, no, Phil. The same feelings of resilience that Halo on Fire, Creeping Death, all these things they inspire in you, those things that those songs you're criticizing, they inspire that in me. Well, my reaction is good. Then keep listening to them and seek after God. So I'll end this the same way I ended the written article, which is that when the grief and angst of the fact that my daughter has inoperable and incurable brain cancer and my wife has an incurable chronic condition, when that just gets to me too much, well, I start playing that song. I pray about it. I work out and I do other things. And I think, well, all right, if the darkness won't go away, then turn out the light. Halo on Fire.